Well, welcome to the fundamentals of real estate. I hope we're going to have a little fun today, but we might give you a little mental.
I think this will be fun. No, it'll be fun.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm your host today, Angela Dillmon, here at Keller Realty, Chesterfield. And this is my wealth building partner,
Glen Calvin at Gill Mortgage.
And our expert buyer's agent, Josh Gulledge, is with us today, celebrating 10 years, by the way. Just a little bit of note on that in real estate, so we're excited about that. So we are here to help you build wealth,
live your dream lifestyle,
and leave legacies that matter.
How about that? All right. So we've been in our buyer series here with Josh.
Which is fun. This is fun for me.
And we started screening last week. We're like, hey, we finally got to look at some homes. We got our search set up. It's so cool. And now we were kind of looking at some visual stuff, right?
Yeah. So the homes passed what I would consider our visual screening process. So that was roads, floodplains. You know, the bar next door was our funny story.
Right?
So it's past
the gas station out back?
It's past the initial screening process, and now we're pulling disclosures at this point.
So that's a good question. So our question of the day is, what are the sellers required to disclose or tell you about the house that they're selling?
That's a great question.
Oh, that's a great question.
One thing we have to answer first, and buyers just don't know this, is what kind of disclosures are there?
Right.
So it's common that buyers will say to me, hey, send me a disclosure, and I'll send them 5 or 6, and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize there's that many. So you got seller's disclosures. You got lead-based paint.
Which are like 6-8 pages long.
Yeah, we'll go into that in a second. We got seller's disclosures, lead-based paint. Condos and townhomes have a specific disclosure that they have. Septic and well.
Septic and well.
If there's a lake.
Ponds and lakes.
Pools. If there's a pool's a big one. So, again, surveys, road agreements. So there's a foundation report. So there's a whole list of... There's a whole list of disclosures that we're really looking for when we talk about that.
Right. That's awesome.
Did they have to disclose if somebody died in the house or the house is haunted? Maybe? Is there a haunted house disclosure?
That's a really common question. Like, do you have to disclose somebody died? You don't know how often we get that question.
Yeah. And she gets a lot being on the sell side. So
what
would you tell a seller?
You know what? In Missouri, you're not required to disclose somebody died in the house.
All right.
Or if it's haunted, Glen. Sorry. You
so
don't have to do that. So the state of Missouri does require you to disclose any major defect in the home.
So what would that be?
If your house floods twice a year,
right,
then you're required to disclose that. Right? If you know you need piering because you've got this big crack downstairs and you've hid it because you put it behind drywall when you finish the house, right? Like anything that you know is a problem, that you've got an issue up in your attic, right? Anything that you know is a material defect, you're required to disclose. Because people can, if they can prove you knew and didn't disclose it, then come back and sue you later.
So it's actually a way of protecting the seller.
So, so disclosures from the listing agent's perspective and the seller's perspective can be very protective. It's like, hey, I told you that. And you're like, no, you didn't. I guess I did. It's here on the paperwork. So, case in point, I had one years ago where there was a double termite treatment. They had treated for termites. A year later, they seemed to be back, and they treated again. And so we let them know, hey, there was some damage. We fixed it, and it was treated twice. And there was a nice big paragraph, and I made sure that the seller was very detailed on what happened and exactly everything he did about it. About a month after closing, of course, the buyer got it, signed off on it. After closing, they call and they like, hey, we're going to replace this kitchen floor and we're finding termites in the floor. You didn't disclose. And I'm like, hey, no one can see what's in the floor.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, here's your seller's disclosure. We did disclose. It was 2 times treated. Here's everything we did about it. You did know that there was a potential that they could sue. You had your own termite inspection, your own guy. He couldn't see it. There's no way a seller could have known. No lawsuit, no problems, no issues whatsoever after.
It's kind of a red flag, and if they treated it twice for termites.
It is a little bit of a red flag, and we'll talk about these kind of things that Josh looks for.
So a lot of those disclosures are pretty self-explanatory. Pond disclosure has a pond. Septic has a septic.
Yeah.
But what's on the actual seller's disclosure? So whenever I pull up the seller's disclosure, it's 6 pages. Mm-hmm. It starts with just HOA information. Are there mandatory assessments that they know are coming? Like, big one, road agreements. Like, hey, it's a private subdivision. The whole road needs to be repaved. Every house is getting hit up for $1,000 for 10 years. Right. Like every year, $1,000 for 10 years. Right. So it tells them, stuff like that. Then it goes into, there's a whole lot on it. Again, methamphetamine usage is one of the things,
You don't
because
want to
that's
buy previous meth house.
it's really, really dangerous on your health.
It is required.
Sinkholes, and I say all of you, I've seen them all. Sinkholes,
That's true.
that the county has come in and filled. So sinkholes, age of the roof. A big one that buyers probably feeling the pain of right now is insurance claims. If that house has had 5 insurance claims on it, that's a red flag for me. Like, can they get insured on this property?
Believe it or not, insurance will go not just like on your credit and you, but on the house itself.
They will.
So too many claims on a house can be a red flag.
Yeah, that comes up when you're calculating the payment. I figured the insurance is going to be $1,800 a year, and it's $5,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, the big ones that buyers immediately think of are the foundation reports.
Right.
So like, do they have water twice a year?
Right.
Have they made any repairs down there?
Right.
I would think the basement leak would be a big one.
How long ago were the repairs made? So
how long ago were they done? With the foundation report done, repairs done last month, and they haven't had time to prove themselves.
Yeah, and so again, we're always trying to save you time. So like, I've had buyers before that they have had numerous water issues over several years, and that's the whole reason they're moving. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at these disclosures, even though everything's fine, and for another buyer, it has the sump pump, it's been fixed.
Right.
But I even mentioned that they had to put in a sump pump, and these buyers are like, been there, done that, not going to happen.
It's true.
So
like that.
if I showed them that property, that would waste everybody's time over something we immediately knew that they didn't want. And so again, that's when we say saving you time. But again, another example is to help people screen is sometimes they'll throw these listing agents will throw a bid for repair on something. Mm-hmm. Like I saw one the other day. It said needs a new roof. Bid for repair on the roof said $7,000. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way they're getting a roof on that house for $7,000. I just knew, and so I looked through the bid, and it was like, it was not architectural shingles. There was no warranty. It was like sometimes it's like,
no film
hey, are they even removing the old roof? Like, it was a very cheap basic. Like, sure, you could put a roof on for that amount, but it was not going to be what any buyer would want, and it wouldn't help you out on your insurance. So it's screening for those red flags for sure on the front end. But then
septics are a big one too. When you look at the septics thing, and they're like, "Hey, we had it serviced, yes," and they're like, "What'd you do? Pumped it out?" I'm like, "Okay, that's great, but how old's the system?" And you come to find out that a lot of even listing agents really don't know much about what the seller's even writing on the disclosure, so they don't know to ask more questions.
Yeah.
So even that agent doesn't know, right? And so we look at it and go, we need to ask 20 more questions based on what you just told me, particularly about septics, wells, ponds, lakes, condos for sure. Tell me a story about a condo. I mean.
Yeah. So again, there's all kinds of stuff with condos now. Like, again, big ones are changing rentals. So like, how many rentals you can have.
Yes, that's a big one.
So Glen, if I have too many rentals in
you're not going to get a loan, or you're not going to get
you're
going to be limited on you making a bigger down payment. There's going to be a lot of we're on red flags today. Yes, on that condominium disclosures. Is the HOA healthy? Is there a lawsuit going on?
Yeah,
are people suing? There's all kinds of stuff with condos. When you underwrite from a lending point on a condo, not only am I underwriting the buyer, I'm also underwriting the whole association.
Right.
So that condo disclosure is big, and the sooner you can get that to the lender, the sooner you can find out if you're wasting time.
I like one of my favorite ones that I look for if they're available is the surveys, because again, if I know like my clients, maybe not even right now, but let's just say they want to put in a pool. Well, it's like, hey, how standard is the lot if I don't have it? And like, is there a setback where they can't, even though you have an extra 15 feet of yard, if there's an MSD thing back there, you can't put your pool on the back third of your lot.
Right.
Even though you
like within sometimes 10 to 20 feet of an easement.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like, you think, oh, I have 30 feet of yard. I could put a pool, anywhere in here. And then, but you're like, oh, well, you can actually only put, it on this 5 foot of land. And I've seen that where it was a ton of land, like easily a pool could fit there. When I pulled the survey, it was like, hey, your patio's so long, you really only have 5 usable feet of grass.
Sure, sometimes those storage zones are right through the middle of the yard.
Yeah.
And you just don't even know it.
And I always like to say this too, whenever sometimes you'll get a disclosure and it's almost blank in my mind. And the very bottom it'll say, seller never lived here, doesn't know much knowledge on the report. Again, I don't put much faith in those disclosures clearly. I prefer, and some buyers, I do tell buyers this on the front end, like, hey, I like to see a lot of information on those disclosures.
Right.
Like, hey, especially old people that have lived there for 35 years. No one knows that house better. And if they
not
are
necessarily old if you live there 35 years, I'm just saying.
That's a good point.
Yes, but that's a long time for somebody to be in one
It's a
house.
very long time.
In one house, that's a long
you
time.
To see a lot.
And they've had 35 years. They might have put on 2 roofs. They might have had a leak. And if they say, hey, I had a leak 10 years ago and fixed it, and this happened and I fixed it, and it's like they list stuff that sometimes it's not even, most people wouldn't even put on there. I love to see that because I'm like, hey, I know that this seller is not hiding something on us.
They're trying to be as honest as
They're
they can.
being as forthcoming as they can. And I know, again, nobody knows my house better than me. And I know whenever I fill one out, that's how I'm going to fill it out. And that way, again, it goes to that protection. If somebody ever comes back to me and said, I filled out this, I lived here a long time. I filled out everything I did, everything I even found out that was done before me.
Right.
Like, I'm not hiding anything. Here you go. And hey, here's my phone number. If you need to call me, like, I'll help you. Like, so sometimes I love to see those people that take such pride of ownership. It's like, hey guys, don't take all these problems because again, these small leaks happen on every house. They might just not be disclosing them like everybody else.
And that's another thing a good agent can do for you when they do read the disclosures. They can identify red flags, and then they can also put your mind at ease that these really aren't major deals and that you're really happy with how much the seller is trying to be forthcoming about things. So looking for red flags on the seller's disclosure, big time saver. I know you also look for issues that when you get to the house, you can actually say, okay, had a leak on that northwest corner, right? 2 years ago and hasn't leaked since or something. We want to go look at that while we're there.
Exactly. And another common one, which we'll go into next podcast, is like, hey, had a leak around the leak in the roof around the chimney. Common spot. See a leak around the chimney in the roof, and I can just tell buyers, oh yeah, that. If they haven't seen it already, that was disclosed, and that's exactly where it was. And that happened 4 years ago. And if it was still happening, that leak would be a lot worse.
So by reviewing these disclosures, I might have seen something. I'm all excited. It clicks all the buttons. But you're going to make sure that we're not wasting time because
so if it passes,
that the seller would disclose.
Again, it passed the visual screening.
Right.
Passed the disclosures to their standard. Again, it's relative to what you're looking for.
So this is a house that nobody died in. It's not haunted.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know that. We're gonna. But at this point,
we do know they didn't make meth in there.
Okay, yes.
At this point, we know
nobody died from making meth and is haunting his house.
Exactly.
No, you have to call Ghostbusters for that.
But we know at this point we're going to go take a look at it because there's not enough red flags on the front end to.
Right, and next week we're going to actually go visit a house and we're going to talk about the screening.
This is fun for me. This is mental and fun.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. We have more than one person that helps search. So if your agent is the kind of person who's trying to do everything to everybody, make sure they're not too overloaded because you will then not save time.
I learned a ton on this podcast. I did.
All right, that's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. Hit the little like button, follow button on the podcast if you like us. That would help us out a lot. We appreciate you listening to us today. We'll see you next week.